The moment he parked the car outside the flickering neon sign of the cheap roadside diner, something inside him tightened, the way it always did when old fears brushed against fresh hope. The place smelled of grease and burned coffee even from the outside, its cracked windows glowing under tired fluorescent lights, and for a split second he wondered if this single choice would decide how the rest of his life unfolded. He had taken her here not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much to pretend to be someone he wasn't. He had learned long ago that honesty, even when it embarrassed him, was better than impressing someone with a lie that would collapse later. What he didn't know was that this simple decision would ripple outward, quietly setting the stage for a moment that would shock everyone who witnessed it. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet acts of sincerity that change lives, take a second right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because real life is built on moments just like these. He was not a man who expected much from life anymore. Years of scraping by had taught him to keep his dreams small and his expectations smaller. He worked long shifts doing honest but invisible labor, the kind people depended on but rarely noticed. He paid his bills on time when he could, skipped meals when he had to, and slept with the dull exhaustion of someone who had stopped asking for more. When he matched with her, it felt like a mistake the universe would soon correct. She seemed too polished, too confident, too full of light. Still, something about her kindness in messages, the way she asked about his day and actually waited for the answer, pulled him forward. He chose the diner because it was familiar and safe, a place where he wouldn't feel like an intruder in borrowed clothes. He could afford the meals without calculating the bill 10 times in his head. The chipped mugs and peeling booths didn't intimidate him, they comforted him. They reminded him of nights when he had survived on little but laughter and hope, back when life felt lighter even though his pockets were emptier. He told himself that if she walked away because of this place, then it was better to know now than later. When she stepped out of the car, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Her presence seemed to bring color into the dim parking lot, and a few heads turned, not because she demanded attention, but because grace has a way of announcing itself quietly. He felt the familiar sting of self-consciousness, wondering if people were already judging the mismatch between them. Inside the diner, the hum of tired conversations and clinking plates wrapped around them. The waitress offered a polite smile that carried the weight of 100 long shifts. Everything felt ordinary, almost painfully so, and that was what made his nerves roar. He watched her take in the room, bracing himself for disappointment. He imagined the polite smile, the excuse about needing to leave early, the gentle letdown he had experienced before. Instead, she sat down without hesitation, smoothing her coat, looking around with curiosity rather than judgment. That alone unsettled him more than rejection would have. He didn't know how to interpret it. He had built his defenses around being overlooked, not accepted. As they waited, his mind wandered back through the road that had led him here. He had grown up learning the value of money by the absence of it. His parents worked themselves into quiet exhaustion, never complaining, never asking for sympathy. Love in his family was shown through sacrifice, not words. When adulthood arrived, it didn't bring freedom so much as responsibility, and every decision felt heavier than the last. Dating had always been difficult. He either felt invisible or inadequate, sometimes both at once. Over time, he had convinced himself that romance was a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet here he was, sitting across from a woman who didn't seem to mind the cracked vinyl seat or the laminated menu smudged with fingerprints. She asked him about his work, not in the distracted way people sometimes do, but with genuine interest. He answered honestly, leaving out nothing, adding no polish. He told her about long days, small victories, and the quiet pride he took in doing his job well even when no one noticed. With each word he felt exposed, as if he were placing his life on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. The food arrived, simple and unpretentious, steaming plates that smelled of comfort. As they ate, something shifted inside him. The tension he had carried for years began to loosen thread by thread. He noticed how she listened, how she laughed at small moments, how she didn't check her phone every few minutes. He started to believe, just a little, that this night might not end in disappointment. But the universe, it seemed, had more plans for this humble diner than he could imagine. Unseen by him, a few tables away sat a group of people who would soon become unwilling witnesses to something unforgettable. They were dressed sharply, their presence slightly out of place in the worn-down diner. Laughter rose and fell from their table, confident and loud. He noticed them only briefly, dismissing them as part of the background noise of life. He had no idea how deeply their eyes would soon be drawn toward his quiet corner. As the meal went on, the check arrived. His heart skipped, a reflex born from years of careful budgeting. He had planned for this, calculated it down to the last coin. Still, the moment carried weight. He reached for the bill without hesitation, a small act of dignity that mattered to him more than the amount itself. He wanted her to see that even if he didn't have much, he took responsibility for what he did have. That was when everything began to change.
He paid the bill calmly, but inside, a storm of emotion swirled. There was relief, pride, and an undercurrent of fear that this might be the last good moment before reality reasserted itself. When he looked up, he noticed something different in the room. The laughter from the nearby table had softened. A few faces had turned in their direction, not out of mockery, but curiosity. It was the kind of attention that makes a person aware of their own breathing. What no one knew, including him, was that the woman sitting across from him was not who she appeared to be. Not because she was hiding something malicious, but because she had grown tired of being seen only through the lens of her success. She lived a life filled with comfort and privilege, but also with loneliness that wealth could not touch. People were drawn to what she had, not who she was. Over time, she had learned to dress down, to choose simple places, to observe how people behaved when there was nothing to gain. This diner was not a test she had planned. It was a moment she had surrendered to. And what she saw in him was rare. There was no performance, no attempt to impress, no bitterness toward a world that had been unkind. He treated the waitress with respect, thanked her sincerely, and carried himself with a quiet self-respect that couldn't be bought. As they sat there, finishing their meal, something unexpected happened. One of the sharply dressed men from the other table stood up and approached them. His presence drew the attention of the entire diner. Conversations paused, forks hovered mid-air. The man looked at him, then at her, clearly trying to understand what he was seeing. There was a moment of tension, the kind that crackles in the air before a storm. What followed shocked everyone. The man spoke not with condescension, but with admiration, addressing the woman with visible respect, acknowledging her in a way that revealed a truth no one else in the room knew. The words themselves mattered less than their effect. The diner seemed to hold its breath. The revelation landed softly but powerfully, like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples in every direction. Faces turned, whispers spread. The waitress froze, hand on the counter. The cheap diner, for one suspended moment, became a stage where assumptions collapsed. He felt the world tilt beneath him, confusion rushing in, followed by a wave of self-doubt so strong it nearly stole his breath. He wondered if this was the point where the illusion shattered, where he would be exposed as someone who didn't belong in her world. But she didn't flinch. She looked at him not with embarrassment, not with apology, but with warmth and certainty. In that look was a silent message that cut through his fear. It said that what mattered to her was not the setting, not the price of the meal, not the opinions of strangers. It was the person who had sat across from her and been real. The man from the other table left, shaking his head in disbelief, and the diner slowly returned to life. But nothing felt the same. The weight of the moment settled over him, heavy and disorienting. He felt small, suddenly aware of every limitation he carried. The old voice in his head returned, whispering that this was where things ended, where reality demanded its due. They stepped outside into the cool night air, the neon sign buzzing above them. He expected the goodbye, the polite explanation, the distance that would inevitably grow. Instead, she lingered. She spoke about values, about how rare it was to find someone who didn't try to be more than they were. She spoke about kindness as if it were a currency far more valuable than money. He listened, barely believing what he was hearing. The world had taught him that people like her did not choose people like him. Yet here she was, standing in the glow of a broken sign, choosing honesty over image, connection over comfort. As the night ended, he walked away changed but uncertain. He didn't know if this was the beginning of something beautiful or just a moment he would carry with him forever. What he did know was that the cheap diner had become a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone who had witnessed that quiet, powerful collision of worlds. And the story was far from over.
The days that followed felt unreal. He moved through his routine with a new awareness, as if the world had subtly shifted its alignment. He replayed the night in his mind, questioning every detail, searching for signs he might have misread. Yet her presence lingered, not as a fantasy, but as a steady warmth that refused to fade. She reached out, not with grand gestures, but with consistency, the kind that builds trust brick by brick. As they spent more time together, the truth of her life unfolded naturally, not as a revelation meant to impress, but as context. She showed him the spaces she inhabited, the responsibilities she carried, and the isolation that often accompanied them. He, in turn, showed her the resilience born from scarcity, the gratitude for small joys, and the strength required to keep going when no one is watching. There were moments of doubt, moments when he felt the distance between their worlds stretch thin and fragile, but each time they returned to what had brought them together in the first place: sincerity. He didn't try to become someone else, and she didn't ask him to. The cheap diner became a symbol, a reminder that love doesn't begin with luxury, but with presence. People around them were shocked, not because their relationship failed, but because it endured. Those who had witnessed that first night spoke about it later, about the man who paid for a simple meal without knowing he was being quietly observed, about the woman who chose character over comfort. The story spread, not as gossip, but as inspiration. He learned that worth is not measured by surroundings, but by how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. She learned that safety and love can exist outside the walls of privilege. Together, they built something grounded and real, something that didn't need approval to survive. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness still matters and honesty still has power, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. Before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what this story made you feel, or share a moment when choosing simplicity or kindness changed your life. Because sometimes the cheapest diner holds the richest lessons, and the simplest choices reveal the truest hearts.